Hi guys, welcome back to Data Playground. I'm Gabriel with you and I'm a data analyst at Data Playground. To continue our curriculum, we'll be looking at a very interesting topic today, the analyst life cycle. And here we are going to go from asking questions to making decisions. So sit back and follow up this video. So think of this. Have you ever been handed something so big that you didn't know where to hold it? What's that feeling that comes with it? It's sometimes overwhelming. It's sometimes confusing because you're wondering where you want to start from. So you've been at trade flow for some time now, and it's a Thursday afternoon, which is 3 weeks into your job as an analyst, and you've searched through the complaints review, you've stared at Amina's messy spreadsheet, you've watched senior analysts pause before they even touch anything in their data, and so you're starting to understand something about this job which you did not know when you started it. You find out that data analysis is less about calculating and it's more about thinking. So your boss, Mr. Okafor, calls a meeting that's going to be between just him, Amina, and you. He sits, he folds his hands on his table and he says, I need to understand what's happening with our business, not a specific a problem. He wants to understand the whole picture. He wants to look at revenue, deliveries, customers, where we are growing, where we are losing ground. And so he says to you, I want to walk into next month's board meeting with a clear, honest story about where trade flow stands. And he says, can you help me build that? So you, of course, you feel that request sets on your shoulders. This is not, a question with a straightforward or a simple answer. It's a kind of moment that splits a lot of analysts into two kinds. We have the analysts who would panic and start pulling random reports, and then we have the ones who would like take a breath. They would nod and say, yes, let me show you how I'd approach it. Now, that difference is what this video is about. This video is not about a tool or a formula, it's about the way of thinking that is going to carry you from any question, be it a small question or an enormous question, and it's going to take you all the way to a decision that someone can actually stand behind. So far, so good. We've covered about 3 videos, and these 3 videos have covered the first three concepts in our full curriculum. You've built, real pieces, and so you already know what analysis is. You already know how to think before touching it, so you know how to size up a data before trusting it. But the thing is, pieces are just pieces until someone holds them together, and that's what the analytics life cycle is. The analytics life cycle is not a new skill. It's more of a map. It's the thing that that it shows you how everything you've learned connects from the moment a question lands on your desk to the moment somebody somewhere decides something because of your work. Now, without this map, even skilled people, they probably wonder if they go the wrong direction. Skilled people, they might be able to do even good work in isolated pockets and even lose thread of how it adds up to anything. So with this map, you always know where to stand. And then this video is also going to close the part one of our curriculum, because after this, in our next video, we'll open real tools, we get our hands into real data. But I want you guys to carry this framework forward, because it's going to be the skeleton that will hold up everything that's to come in front. Now, have you ever considered um how a house is built? Like, nobody is going to build a house by laying bricks first. First, you need to understand what the family actually needs. For example, it's a family home you are trying to build. You need to understand, okay, what does my family actually need? How many bedrooms? What's our budget? What location are we choosing? And then after that, you have to go with a plan, right? And then from the plan, someone comes around and then surveys the land. And then from the land, the foundation, of course, is next. Foundation goes down. And then the structure rises. Then we work on the interior. And before anyone even moves a single box in, someone has to still come to inspect it all. And only then does the family live in it, and the house finally does what it was built to do. Now, the thing is, if you skip a stage and something breaks later, for example, if you skip the survey, the foundation will definitely crack. If you skip the inspection and the cracks still stay hidden, uh, of course, is going to become expensive. By expensive, it's going to result in a collapse, which involves life there, or which may involve life. So definitely, if you try to rush the move into the house, right, you are going to be living inside unfinished chaos. So this is the same mindset, or this is the same map that an analyst follows. Analytical work is no different from building a house. Every stage has to carry the one after it. If you rush through a particular stage to get to the exciting part, you definitely pay for it later. You won't pay for it immediately, you pay for it later. And that's why it's important that you do not skip any stage. And so the analytics life cycle actually has 7 stages. The first stage is to define the question. The second is to identify and collect relevant data. The third is to clean and prepare your data. The fourth is to analyze. The fifth is to interpret. The sixth is to communicate. And finally, you have to support the decision. So let's start with the first one, which is defining the question. In the analytics life cycle, this is where everything starts. Before the data, before the tool, before anything, the first thing is to ask the question. Now, in our second video, we talked about turning vague requests into real questions. Now, of course, this is where that skill actually lives, defining the question. This particular stage is not a stage where you say, open the file and see what looks interesting. This stage has to do with knowing precisely what decision is waiting on the other side of your work. Now, your boss, Mr. Okafor, said he wants, a clear, honest story about where your company trade flow stands. Now, that's a direction. It's not yet a question. Now, your job as an analyst is to try to turn that direction into a question that you can actually answer through your analysis. And so you write that direction, or you frame that direction as a question. You begin saying like, for example, what's the trade flows revenue trend over the last 12 months by country, for example? Or you ask yourself which categories are growing, which categories are holding or slipping in each market. You may also ask yourself what's the delivery success rates by country and zone, and how has it changed in the past 6 months? You could also ask yourself how many new customers came in each month and what's the 60-day, repeat rates? And then you could ask yourself also which country is carrying the strongest momentum right now. Now you've broken that direction into 5 questions. Now these 5 questions are specific enough to answer. Each of these questions are tied to a decision that your boss, Mr. Okafor, actually has to make. So at this point, you can say that stage one is finished. As long as you can write down these questions in clear and plain sentences, you are done with what? Stage one. Now, a good analyst uh is not going to leave that meeting, that Thursday meeting, and just go straight into the data. A good analyst will go back to their desk, they'll open a blank page, they'll write the questions down, all of these questions clearly, and then probably send them back to Amina and Mr. Okafor with a simple note, maybe saying something like, before I start, I want to confirm I'm focused on the right things. Does this capture it? Now that's you trying to communicate with those involved in your analysis process, because communication is a very important aspect of data analysis. That could like just like doing this could like just take like let's say like 10 minutes, but then this is going to serve as the difference between 3 days of work that lands exactly where it needs to be and 3 days of work that circles the point without ever touching it. Now, the next stage in the analytics life cycle is to identify and collect data you need. You already know your questions now. The next question becomes simpler, but people still skip it anyway. You have to ask yourself, what data do you actually need to answer these questions I've written out? It's like a cook standing in the kitchen and about to make a meal. A cook will not just start cooking with whatever is sitting on the kitchen counter. They would read the receipt first. They'll check the pantry. They'll find out what's missing before the pan is even hot. And if something isn't there, they'll try to adjust. They don't just pretend like it doesn't matter. Now, data analysis requires the same discipline from you. For the board report, for example, you'd need maybe orders, the table containing orders to be able to talk about revenue, right? You need the other items to be able to break down categories. You need customers, for to be able to check their acquisition and repeat behavior. You need deliveries for success rates. You need regions to be able to connect cities to countries. You need field that contains dates to be able to understand trend. And so you check all these that you need and you ask yourself, does it exist? Is this usable? How far back does it go? Where are the holes? So this is where our third video. And by the way, if you've not been following the playlist where we are walking through the full data analysis curriculum, try to look at our playlist on that and follow through from video one. Now back to this. This is where our third video is going to matter because for example, 15% of delivery dates missing, or it's 50% of delivery dates that are missing or changes. It's going to transform what you can say about delivery performance, right? For example, 8 months of order history instead of 12 simply means you are looking at the 12 months trend now, not an 8-month trend. And Mr. Okafor asked, what Mr. Okafor asked was never fully possible. You need to know this because the moment you are starting your analysis, you need to know what's available for me, not when you've already gone far. If your boss is asking for a 12 months trend and you only have 8 months available, then that becomes a question. How can I make up for all this? And you're asking this immediately, not when you already started your analysis. Now, mapping data for a board report, the analyst is actually going to hit two walls almost immediately. For example, the deliveries table was, you can see, it was missing dates for, let's say, 8% of records, right? And then the orders table only reached back 10 months, not 12, or maybe reached back 8 months, not 12. Now, neither of these problems is capable enough to kill the project. But then finding them at this stage of the analytics life cycle would help you adjust the plan before you have to lose days to work that would then need to be returned. Now, after this analytics, after the identifying and collecting the data, the next thing is to clean and to prepare your data. You already have the data you need now. And then this is the stage that nobody is really going to warn you about. This is the stage that is going to eat more of your time as an analyst than almost anything else, to be very honest with you. The cleaning stage. Let me be very honest with you, this stage will not impress anyone, should be told. Nobody's going to admire you for trying to standardize your city names. It will never make a highlight reel. But everything you build afterwards is going to stand, or is going to fall on whether this part was done properly. If you picture a carpenter building a table, carpenter would get a beautiful design, he would get good wood. But if the wood arrived from the supplier full of knots which were warped in places, and probably caused to uneven lengths, before that table can even begin to exist, the wood has to be sanded first. It has to be straightened. It has to be cut through. Now, none of that is the exciting part of making furniture. But then, if you skip it, the finished table is going to wobble. Eventually, it's going to splinter. Eventually, everything is just going to fall apart. Now, data does the same thing to you if you let it. For the board reports, for example, this means you'd have to standardize the country and city spellings. You have to decide what to do with the missing delivery dates. You'd have to write down exactly why. You'd have to confirm that other amounts are numbers and not texts that are pretending to be numbers. You'd have to, make your date fields consistent enough to trend properly. You'd have to hunt for for duplicate customer records. You'd have to flag the outliers that could quietly bend an average out of shape. This never happens in one clean pass. You are going to clean, you are going to check, you are going to find something else, you are going to clean again. Now that's not a sign that something went wrong. That's just what the work actually looks like. After this stage comes analyzing your data. Now, this stage is what a lot of people want to rush into, but you cannot overlook the first three stages of that quiet, careful groundwork before a single real calculation comes into play. Of course, you need to know that that time was not wasted. That's the only reason the analysis that that follows can even be trusted at all. This stage of the analytics life cycle is a stage where you get to explore your data, you calculate, you compare, you look for the shapes hiding in the numbers, you let what you lead, you let what you find, lead you towards the next decision. Instead of just, forcing the data to answer only the questions you arrived with. For the board reports you are preparing, you could look at monthly revenue by country. You could analyze this across 10 months. You could try to look at the category performance by units and value. You could also analyze the delivery success by zone, maybe this quarter against the quarter before. You would also look at the customer acquisition by month. Wow, you can look at the 60-day repeat rate by country. Now, here's something very important that you should hold on to: the fact that analysis is never about trying to find something impressive. It's about finding something that's true, something that can be transformed into a decision. So sometimes your data is actually going to hand you something that's uncomfortable, maybe a strategy that is not even working. Your data might hand you a market that is quietly declining, may hand you numbers that don't agree with what the CEO was hoping to hear. So, as an analyst, your job in that particular moment is to say what's true, not what is wanted. The instant you start shaping findings around expectations instead of reality, you've stopped being an analyst. You've become a storyteller that's just telling a story that nobody asked for, right? So, let's move to the next stage, which is to interpret the findings. Now, this is another stage where a lot of good analysts, quietly, fall short. Not because they can't calculate, but because they stop one step too early. Finding a trend, finding or getting an insight is not the same as understanding it. For example, if we say trade flows delivery success rate in Kenya dropped from 88% to 79% between July and October, that is a finding. But now, here's a case of an interpretation. Trade flows delivery success rate in Kenya dropped from 88% to 79% between July and October. That's a 9-point fall that lines up almost exactly with a new Korea partner starting the Nairobi zone in August. The drop is concentrated in Nairobi specifically. The rest of Kenya held steady. This points to, of course, to a new Korea underperforming, and it may need addressing before peak season begins in November. This is a clear interpretation. A finding will tell you what's happened. An interpretation will tell you why it might have happened and what it means for the decision waiting on the other side. Interpretation will always ask for three things of you at once. The first is that your numbers are correct. The second is that you understand the business well enough to see them in context. And then the third is that you can tell the difference between a real signal and an ordinary noise. Now, here's one caution you should have. And I mean this, be honest about what you do not know. If a pattern could have, more than one explanation, say so. Analysts who try to oversell their certainty are dangerous because they hand decision makers false confidence. But analysts who are honest about the edges of what they know are the ones who, you know, people learn to trust. So let's move to the next stage of the analytics life cycle, which is communicating the results. Already you've done this work before, right? And you already understand what it means. Now, after passing through all your stages, this is the stage that now decides whether any of that even mattered at all. The stage that has to do with communication. It's worth knowing that the best analysis in the world is worth nothing the moment it cannot be understood by the person who is meant to act on it. It technically, flawless reports that nobody can follow is in every way that matters more of a failed report. You can think of yourself as a kind of a translator here because you spend days inside the data, you understand things the people you are presenting to simply cannot understand at the same depth which you understand. So your job is to carry the most important truth across that gap from the language of data into the language of decisions. So what this means is that the insights which you have gotten would come first, not the method you use in analyzing your data. You are communicating your insights, not your method. Nobody has a board meeting would want to hear how you clean the country curriculum. What they want to hear is that South Africa is growing fast and the logistics underneath it are straining. Communication just basically, it means knowing the difference between um what the data shows and what the data suggests, and not trying to blur the two or mix the two together. They should be clear enough and should be able to speak about it, communicate your findings to those who matter, to your stakeholders. Okay, so let's proceed to the next stage, which is to support the decision. Now, analysis does not end at the presentation stage. It ends when someone, because of what he found, actually does something. Sometimes that's immediate. For example, if Mr. Okafor, hears the South Africa insights and authorizes an emergency logistics investment on the spot, that's done. Sometimes to supporting decision might be slower. Leadership may sometimes, need time. They might even ask questions that you did not see coming. They might push back, and your job is to always try to answer with evidence and not defensiveness. Your role as an analyst here is to support the decision, not to make the decision. You are not to control the decision. You are not to quietly hope the data lands where you expected it to. The moment you start hoping for a particular conclusion, you've already given up on the one thing that made your work worth listening to, which is your objectivity. And then there's one more thing this stage is going to ask of you. You are to follow through. Did the Korea change actually improve Kenya's numbers after they made decision based on your data? If you close that loop, that's how you can become a better analyst because you learn over time. You know which kind of findings actually move something and which ones quietly disappear. You know if you are doing fine as an analyst, if your decisions are actually benefiting real life business problems or solutions. Now, so this again are the 7 stages at a glance. The first is to define the question. You have to start without one of the mistakes that a person might make at this stage is starting without clarity. The second stage is to identify and collect data, and a mistake you might likely make is to assume that the data is complete. The third is to clean and prepare your data. Of course, one of the common mistakes is you might want to skip this stage to just go faster, but remember that data most of the time is not always clean. Another stage is to analyze your data, and one of the mistakes a person might make is probably stopping at just surface finding instead of trying to go deeper. And then another stage is interpreting the data. and then you have the communication stage, and then you have supporting the decision. All right. So knowing where things usually break is nearly as useful as knowing um them as knowing the stages themselves, right? Okay. So if we try to look at all what the analytics life cycle actually looks like for Mr. Okafor's requests. Now, before a single tool has even been opened, if you go through stage one, right, and you're able to answer five sharp questions covering revenue, you'll be able to look at the questions, you'll be able to cover category, delivery, acquisition, repeat rates. Now, your stage two would end up giving you five different tables that have been mapped, and of course two gaps will be found, and you could even write down the gaps plainly. Your stage three, which is your cleaning stage, would help you to know that you should standardize the names, right? You should resolve placeholder issues, you should check the format, you should hunt out all duplicates, you should flag all outliers. Could take maybe half a day. Now, your stage four, your analysis stage, is going to help you look at monthly revenue by country, category revenue by month, delivery success by zone, acquisition by month, repeat rate by country. Maybe a day or two is what this might take. And then you have your stage five, which is where you ask, so what? As we already talked about this in one of our previous videos. So what is attached to every single finding? It just gives you a few hours of thinking and talking it through with your immediate boss, Amina. And then your stage six, which is the communication stage, is you building a clean deck, which is maybe no more than 10 slides, that is going to lead with the three insights that actually matter. And then your stage seven is to try to stay available through the board meeting and even after. Always learn to prepare for the questions that you can already guess at, and even try to book a debrief with your immediate boss, Amina, for the following week. Now, that's the whole plan, which you can build in under 15 minutes, and each minute is going to be worth every one of them. All right, so this is what we just talked about, the full plan for trade flows board reports on this slide here. So you have a simple task here, and as usual, I'm going to attach my email address to add the description of this video, so you can send your feedbacks, and I'll do all I can to respond to a large number of the feedbacks I get, or if you have solutions to this project, I'll try my best to uh, give a feedback on everyone I get. So you have a mini project here, and this is going to be the most ambitious project in all of part one, which we've looked at. It's going to come is like more like the complete plan for trade flows board reports, and it's going to be combining all seven stages. Here you are going to be writing the complete life cycle plan for trade flows board reports. You're not doing the analysis itself, you're just trying to look at the plan behind it. Now, the first stage is your five questions, and you need to be able to write down why each of these questions matters to the board. The second stage is for every question, the exact data and table it comes from plus one gap. What's checking first. The third stage is you are going to write down a cleaning checklist, right? At least six specific tasks which you would carry out during your cleaning process. And then the fourth is for each question, name the type of analysis, one line each. And then the fifth question is or the fifth stage rather is for two of your five questions, write the full interpretation, not just the finding. Try to write the meaning underneath it. The sixth is write about 3 to 5 sentences on how you structure the presentation, what's going to come first, who's in the room, what format does it carry best. And lastly, write down two things you'd actually do in the week after the board meeting to close the loop. All right. So we've come a long way and we are done with the part one of our curriculum. If you think back to where you were at the start of our first video, staring at Amina's spreadsheet, no idea where to even begin, and now look at where you're standing. You already understand what analysis is now. You know how to think before your hands ever touch a tool. You can easily, size up data before you even decide to, trust it. And now you are carrying a complete seven-stage way of moving from any question, no matter how big, no matter how vague, and you are carrying it all the way to something real and changing just because of your work. You've covered four videos already of pure thinking, and somewhere in the middle of it, without quite noticing the exact moments, you probably even become a different kind of thinker than the person who started the first video. So, part one of this curriculum is complete, and everything we are going to be building from here on is what you carry now. So, for example, when you are deep in a SQL query later or you are wiring up a dashboard, the life cycle is still going to be running quietly underneath. And you might be it's maybe inside stage 4 or stage 6 of some specific piece of work anyway, but just know that the stages would never stop existing just because the tools around them change. In fact, the stages are the reason why the tools would even mean uh, anything at all. So, in our next video, we are going to be looking at Google Sheets, which of course will probably be your first real tool, but you're not going to be working into it as a beginner that's fumbling for the right formula. You are working in as someone who already knows why they are there. And so we are going to start with the fundamentals. We're going to look at how spreadsheets holds data, how can you move through them, how can you think clearly with them before reaching for anything more advanced. And by the time the next video ends, Google Sheets would not feel like something you are still trying to learn. It will feel more like a room you already know how to move in. So thank you for watching this video. Please try to like this video, share this video to your colleagues and your friends and those who you'd like to learn, and do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I would also drop the link to our Telegram community in the description of this video, and as well my mail. Like I said earlier, please join our community, send your feedbacks to our mail, and this is where we call it. And I'll see you in our next video. Goodbye.